Even without the gin. We will begin tonight's program. I'm going to be doing a medley. We're starting off, it's the third movement of Berlioz's second piano concerto, and then I'll be concluding with a personal transcription I did of a bouncy little number from the pen of another Parisian composer, Memphis Slim. And those of you tracking the score personally as I play might care to take note that tonight's the general topics are Did you give me an A? For the ordinary mind, the height of hubris is in it thinking it understands anything. A sign in the semi-bombed-out reputed mystical run dry cleaners announced, "We'll put softeners in your sheets, we'll put starch in your shirts. But the one thing we will not do is put ideas in your civilized heads." All shoe repairs will be ready next Thursday. That's right, next Thursday. Always next Thursday. A saying used among a certain band of transcendental explorers states, "Those who can't wait, don't wait. And those who can't wait, sometimes must." But that still doesn't change anything. Now some telecommunication news. One man called every number in the book, and just look where it got him. Or the other interpretation of that is, one man called every number in the book, and just look where it got him. Or just look where it got him. Or screw it. Well, to the one of his sons who showed the least promise, the old man offered him this advice: if there is anything resembling a substitute for stupidity, it is good humor. Kindness dictates that some of what one might say to hormones, one would not say to neurons, and in a weird kind of way, vice versa. Only those locked into binocular vision mistake a spider's strength as superior to that of the web. Of course, within a closed system, this is how perforce it must be. But there are two classes of closed systems, the one out there and the one in you. As he stepped back in the house, a man was suddenly struck with the notion, what if my thoughts talk about me when I'm not here? Consciousness, as a circus act described. Consciousness. A band of squirrels doing tricks balanced atop a pole supported by a group of unpredictable beavers. As they were purchasing some cotton candy, a young boy asked his father, "Is reliability and predictability the same thing?" The kind of question which helped reassure the elder as to the little one's species. Only two classes of people can, on human consciousness, unconditionally depend: man the collective, and those permanently awakened. And as they rambled along, partaking of their gossamer confectionery, the boy and father came upon the booth housing the "guess how long you can hold your breath" game. Progress, a brief survey. When man's intellectual world is not complex enough, he makes it so. Just as there is effort and there is success, just as there is a race and then the finish line, so too is there a similar situation in the struggle to become more conscious. Not the same, but similar. And not really even similar. Above the hat rack in the city cafe hung a sign that said, "The only thing you are permanently is dead." Noise can be fatally distractive to a neural warrior. "Don't forget," reminded one chief to his son, "the enemy is not out there, but in you, in your own limited awareness." Reality. Reality is simply reality until you put man in the picture. Then you must modify your description. You're not going to start that stuff about when the light hits the backdrop in a certain way that you can see the reflection of, or the image of Boog Powell again, are you? Plus, I didn't get healed last time you said that he was. At 15, one boy asked himself, "Why be ordinary?" And at 25, "Why be stupid?" And at 35, "Why be a slave?" And finally thought, "Why are we made to worry over what we are other than to keep us from becoming something other than we are?" In the history of this planet, only two men have ever outsmarted life, and both of them are forever still being born. The carny guy cocked his straw bowler over to the side of his head, tugged on his lower lip, squinched up one eye as he gave him a good going over, and announced his conclusion. "You're 48 years old, your weight's 192 pounds, and you won't be able to hold your breath over 5 more minutes." As he stepped back in the house, a man was suddenly hit with the idea, "What if my thoughts talk about me when I'm gone?" And his thoughts said, "Well, you shouldn't be gone." One chap marks his, quote, progress by the fact that he has moved from letting television drive him crazy to letting radio do it. "One step at a time," says he. A certain non-standard population group, now extinct, held the belief that life originally spoke directly to man, but that was before the days of telephones and other forms of electronic communication. Once upon a time in a deep, deep wood was a deep, deep man who communicated with himself, or so it was believed. And based upon this belief, his shallow, but perfectly normal neighbors told him to either stop it or get out of town. And now for some New Age news. One guy's a channel for foreign forces only, and a hit wherever he goes. Yeah. Think about it. A man returned to his library for a second time, letting his eyes sweep the shelves, as to himself he marveled. And to think, man just made it all up. And dipping into our Mystics Dictionary, we find normal conversation described as hearing other people talk to themselves out loud. Life provides needed medical treatment that man might otherwise reject through a simple device known as history. Until man had a mind, all he could do was hunt, eat, sleep, mate, and play around. Geez, what a limited life, soon thought he, and bam! Hardly before you knew it, he was neurally off and running. Some generations later, some of his progeny noted, "Geez, thanks bunches." Analog anthropology asphyxiated. Men made up all of the many and diverse creation stories to try and get out of a bind. The sign on the side of the partially inflated upper altitude weather balloon carried this message: there will be no allegories in heaven. Thank God. Unless, of course, you happen to be there literally. No one within sight of the apparatus asked to take a ride therein. Okay, clear the beach, announced the shoreline police, especially all of you little sand grainies. Health, a conversation overheard in the city. It takes a real man to drink all the water his body needs. Yes, and one who will think all the thoughts beneficial for his head. The truly interested man does himself discernible harm to forget that part of the purpose of speech is to distract man from what is happening in life, not to explain and clarify it as is commonly believed. Talk has a singular ability to keep man from looking at certain things too bluntly. The so-called truth. A cheap shot men take at one another. Between lovers, you ask about the other's past at your own peril. Same as with the awakened and what their mind used to think. Contrary to maxims via popular book titles, one guy says he doesn't look back in anger, but does get mad at himself every time he looks back. No. And one warrior thought, if it's got to be noise, then let it be original noise. A field test of intelligence. A field guide test of intelligence. An oak tree is stupid. Pussy willows, less so. The mind, even less. And after that, I wouldn't push it if I were you, if you get my drift. After years of metaphysical reading and reflection, the monk sat one day silently in his cell and thought, okay, if feet are real, then shoes are allegorical, right? Mused he fearlessly forward. No, maybe it's like this. If the mouth is literal, then words are metaphorical. Hummed he some more. Wait, I'll bet this is it. If I really were a physical person sitting here in an actual location, then all of what I've thought about it is both moot and meaningful, useless and enlightening. And just then his cat brushed against his leg. Only a man who understands everything understands how much he understands, and thus understands everything. We'll return to what we were talking about last time and really complex it up and expand it, using as our dual springboard the idea that one man expressed last time, asking himself, why do not men learn more from listening to what they themselves say? That in conjunction with an extension of that tonight that said part of the purpose of speech is to distract man from to keep man from seeing in a certain way what's going on in life, not to clarify and explain it as is commonly believed. Grab at least one example from last time, and maybe a few more you remember. As far as people talking, I was pulling out the example that's very common now of charismatic leader. That is now almost one word as part of the popular, serious press even. When they're reporting a news story, as soon as some cult leader is involved with something nefarious enough to make the news, which is the only way they're going to make the news, he suddenly becomes charismatic. There are more, just so we don't stick on that one. And the government will bear the cost for this. That's one. I'll get to it in a minute. That's one. I heard one today on the news. A guy says about a terrible event that happened to his family. He says, the devil is busy everywhere. Another one, subconscious motivations. That's one. And another good one is patriotism. Last time, if you recall, those of you who are here and listening or tuning in, when I started going down the line of the idea that you could learn something, I mean something serious, I mean something useful and something astounding, something that you've never thought about, that you do not find in books, you don't find it mentioned, and that is simply listening to what men say. And I stressed at that time it was not on the basis of psychological deconstruction or psychological analysis in the ordinary sense of it. And it's still not, but you got to listen fast because I'm going to muck it up. Although at the normal level, what is known as psychological analysis serves its purpose, what I'm about to do is not psychological analysis, contrary to my warning from last time that that's what it was not, but it's going to sound like it if you do not take into account that this is not a psychological analysis. It is simply a blunt presentation of the bricks and mortar of things as they are. Although what I'm going to do would fit in, as always, if you can hear it, to something less, which always works. You can always include, if you want to look for it, you can always include some sort of third grade lesson in arithmetic in a college calculus course. It still fits. It is a lesser version. Take the idea of the charismatic leader. Now I'm going to start off and give these fairly simply, verbally. Charismatic leader, and you recall, hoping that they will say something of an extreme negative nature has happened. Some group of people, they found them, 200 of them dead from drinking, poisoned, Dairy Queens, or hot chocolate. It'd be hot chocolate. Let's say they found them, this whole group of people in Fredtown in Alaska. But see there, it was poisoned, it was laced, arsenic-laced hot chocolate. And they found it was decent people, honorable people, people with college educations, and they all committed suicide or something horrible happened. They found out all their bank accounts have been wiped out, and they'll suddenly come up with a picture. Nobody's ever heard of this little group, and here he is, little Omar the igloo maker or somebody. Little old short, dumpy guy with warts all over his face, and suddenly, though, he is the charismatic leader of said cult, Omar the igloo crusher. All right, what is that doing? And let me stress one more time, I know how sticky this gets, but it's just blunt. It is only the childish, it is only the more simplistic version, such as if you try to hear what I'm about to start doing as a psychological analysis. That's the only thing that's complex, because you should know by now psychological analysis goes nowhere. If you're thinking within a closed system, and that's all you're doing, then you have a closed system mind. Hence the number of dollars I spend having to pay royalties for using the word merry-go-round so constantly. There is no way out. Psychological explanations explain nothing. Religious explanations explain nothing. No explanation explains anything at that level. They serve a purpose, but they do not explain anything. So watch it. The charismatic leader, ... What does it do? it helps. It keeps man from having to face the fact that he is still a pack animal. It keeps man from having to face the fact of how submissive he is. It keeps men from having to face the fact of how easily, I can't believe I'm going to even waste my time, how easily led they are. Nay, dice nay. How insistent they are upon being led. And of course the ever popular and all-inclusive, it also keeps men from realizing how dumb they are. But I know that's a little too point blank for most people. I won't say what kind of people, but most people. And you know who you are. You old most people, you. I can't resist. Try not to hear this just as psychological. It fits. But think about it. And it's not complicated, the psychological explanation, or to take this as being a psychological observation or opinion. No. It fits. And it could be just classified, well, that's a psychological, an attempted psychological analysis. No. Look right past it. That's the only complex part, and then it's even full complex, because the complexity never leads to any kind of greater understanding. The more complex you get at the ordinary level, it's like, well, I didn't know what was going on. I started out majoring in philosophy, and I got my bachelor's degree. And I pressed on, though, and now I've got my PhD, and boy, I really got no idea what's going on. You understand? It's like, it'll go faster and faster. Like, well, yes, I don't know what I'm doing, but hey, I don't know what I'm doing now at a much higher level. There's the sheepskin to prove it. Charismatic leader. You're hearing about it. You could have somebody involved. You could have a family member. But it'd just be you hear about it. And you're a sophisticated, ordinary person, and you hear this story. And you think, well, that's the third or fourth one this year. That you had a family member that got caught up in some wild cult and got killed or got taken for their money or their health wrecked. And you couldn't believe it. Or it can just be on the basis that you cannot believe in this day and time how people can still do that. And there in 2 words, 5 syllables, it's explained away. In contemporary, you don't have to say anymore. That's part of this is not an attack, remember, now of cliches. We're holding them up. Not even to honor, we're trying to hold them up so that you see they're made out of bricks and mortars the same way as your liver and the same way as your brain. It explains when they say charismatic leader. Now that is to the point that is a cliche in the positive sense, that it immediately answers to many people. It answers any uneasiness you have about how does this go on? How is it that perhaps they gave a little preface or a little more info that it turns out that the member of this cult that all committed suicide, that every one of them had at least a bachelor's degree. They were all from upper middle class families, and you listen to all this. And let's just say you're sitting there fairly disinterested prior to this, contemporary, modern man or woman, and you think, how can this be going on? 1994. How? And they say something, they just flash a picture. And as I said, the picture can belie. You can look at the guy, but they'll say the charismatic leader, and your brain will hear that, your mind, and just go, There has now been, the term has been around enough, there have been enough made-for-TV movies, there have been enough stories about all these madmen that just seem to have a hypnotic, just modern-day Rasputins with a better haircut, better table manners. But in some way, they get these poor people. What we say poor people, you understand? They got these people, that's what would disturb an ordinary, sophisticated person to start with. They take these educated, middle-class, successful people, and it's inexplicable. How can this go on? And the bodies have been identified as member of such and such cult, led by that charismatic leader, and you go, and you almost all questions are then answered. That's something that you keep up enough with the news, and you're that kind of, to fit the definition of a modern, contemporary, sophisticated person, then you know the term. You understand the term answers almost all questions. I shouldn't shave it. It, in most cases, answers all questions. the charismatic leader. That is, it's obvious that they don't have to say anymore. You've already got the full picture of him hypnotizing people, or all kinds of leaning on them, all kinds of brainwashing, and makes them sit in a room like I do you people when you show up for these tapings, for 4 days in a row, no food, take away all your beer, just make them suffer, and they get in such a condition they'll do anything. He says, right, everybody write me a check for your bank account. And they go, like you got to go through all that shit to take advantage of people. Well, all right, besides the little dramatic humor there, theatric humor. Do consider, here's what we're faced with. Not making apologies, not taking sides, not being partisan about any of it, because it's a waste of time. Unless you're going to try and pull the mortar out and say, well, the bricks will stay up there. Yeah. If you got any sense, you're not going to live there. So we're not taking any of it either way. But consider this, you're faced with the fact that people went and lent themselves to this. What you consider to be, if you're an ordinary person, your peers, other people. This could happen to me, and sometimes some smart-ass news commentator will throw it in like, those anchors will be talking like after all this happened, the charismatic leader, and one will say, it makes you wonder, how easily we could all get took, doesn't it, Biff? Biff will say, yeah, Bob, I guess we always have to stay alert, keep our wits about us. Okay, we'll be back after this short commercial break. And it's like everybody's going to be on guard. They're not going to take advantage of me, because the insinuation being, the explanation of charismatic leader being, they were helpless. On to some others. The guy said, the devil's at work. The devil is still busy today. And this was on a news story. Again, it was a guy from an urban area. Something terrible happened there in his neighborhood to his family, and he looks off somewhat philosophical. You thought at first, philosophically, and says, well, the devil is still busy. Because that's a pretty old one. The modern version is subconscious traumas, subconscious ills. They find some guy has murdered his whole family, or a serial killer, and they immediately say, he's been arrested, and they call him, they'll give 2 or 3 minutes of that, and they'll say, and as soon as even a cursory background check was done on the man, not only did he have an extensive criminal record, but it found out he had spent most of his early teen years in a home for the mentally disturbed, or he had been passed about through 27 foster homes. And all of these, you understand, they immediately, when you hear that this guy, and they show his picture, there he is. In fact, he looks in better shape than the charismatic leader up in Anchorage. But here it is, and it's a 21-year-old kid. He's standing there, and he's in handcuffs, and they say that, without any doubt, he's the one who'd gone through 3 states in the last 2 weeks and killed 27 helpless people. And there he stands, and for all intents and purposes, he looks like the kid next door. And this is disturbing to ordinary people. But they say, it's just a version of, well, the devil, if it was years ago, they'd say, well, the man's obviously demon possessed. But now they will throw in right quickly, since that is not the commonly held urban opinion, cosmopolitan opinion, is that what I just said, it turns out that immediately his record came back, he's only 21 years old, and he's already spent 12 years in foster care to 27 families, and spent extensive time in homes for troubled youth. And you hear that, and it's the same thing. It like explains it. It's obviously an anomaly. It's an aberration. It's not something that's going to happen every day. There is an explanation for it. And the explanation is always just out of reach. You understand? The explanation does everything except, explain it. Can I put it to you? Now we're going to get to that in a minute, though. See, there's nothing wrong. It's not supposed to explain it. Like I said, psychological traumas are really psychological drives and motivations, subconscious, unconscious. That's just a variation of the devil's a busy man. But there are still people, as I said, not to discount that still, the ideas of devil actually being a personification of inherent evil, actually being a person, it has its ups and downs. It gets popular, it makes a comeback. The devil's almost more resilient than Phil Collins and Deep Purple. I mean, they keep coming back. At any rate, it's just right now, 1994. You can go on the news programs now. network news programs on television, and they'll be doing, quote, a serious piece. They of course, attempt to act like objective observers and reporters. There are certain kinds of stories, in case you hadn't noticed, that all people who, just the justice of life being such that rise to the point of getting on network television as reporters of any kind, there are certain stories that they suddenly, you can see them, that they give and will insist about, now this is an objective report, we don't want you to think that we're taking side. Whereas other stories that what amounts to an editorial. And that has nothing to do with the press or reporting. We're talking about the human intellect again, the nervous system. But there's still being stories done that right now the devil is somewhat back in vogue. And it's real easy now to turn on when they'll find one of these serial killers, my 22-year-old boy that's killed all these people. They will point out, they'll suddenly have, I don't know why I should use this as an example of common modern day intelligence, but they'll have the chief of police or the sheriff of the county. And he'll say, and the reporter will say, well, is it true that in his car or in his possession they found a whole lot of scribblings that seem to have some kind of satanic reference? He'll go, that's true, and we are considering that as a serious possibility, as a motivation behind this. Of course, that's when you should really bang on your TV or your head and think, is this 1994? At least he should have said, well, we understand he had a disturbed and troubled youth. But anyway, it's still being taken seriously. And now it's easy to laugh at in a sense, but it's the same thing that if you were laughing, if I use you as exemplifying a modern day cross-section of civilized, educated humanity, you do not laugh at the idea of subconscious traumas or troubled youth and the kind, you do not laugh at that. And it's the same damn thing, exactly. Except it's got to be changed. The words have to keep changing. But last time, I reported a news item of a guy that said, what if the real importance of thought is mere existence and not its content? I noticed nobody asked me to comment on that one. All right, I won't. But that's it. The point is, the mind must have what appears to be an explanation of that which it finds unsatisfactory, to say the least. Mass murderers, your own family being hoodwinked by some kind of charlatan. You don't know the difference between this charismatic leader who took the flock, no difference between him and the Pope or the head rabbi, if there was one, or the head of the Muslim religion of Islam. The difference is, you're going to fit in your own version. One's dead, one got caught, one's got better PR, one's larger, one's organization is larger, one is now institutionalized, one is now part of the web. For those of you that didn't get the one about only those locked into binocular vision mistake the strength of the spider for that of the web. And so you're supposed to think, wait a minute, it's got to be. And you could even think, even what's his name has said similar things that, like the mind will never come up with anything of superior intelligence, and computers will never come up with AI that's superior to itself, because an artist cannot produce or create anything superior to his own intelligence. And so therefore the web that a spider weaves, spins, has to be less strong than the spider, because it came from the spider. So you've been listening with one ear, so what? All right, two ears, so what? Now the web. Did I say tonight there may be some allegory as opposed to last time? I didn't put that down, but I believe that there was some coming up sometime tonight. The government, they'll be saying, how about, let's tie all the stories together. The same news story, a follow-up to the young man that's been arrested, that they say they have conclusive proof is the one responsible for these 27 ghastly murders, and about how he had been in and out of foster homes, etc. And then they'll go for the next anchor, they'll turn the page and they'll say, and along with this, the governor today of the fine state here of Nebraska says that this is just further proof of the program he had already proposed earlier this year and had been rebuffed thus far by the local legislature to set up 20 new institutions and halfway houses to counsel the teenage disturbed youth of our state And of course, in his proposal is that each county pick up the tab for their own institutions. And they just move right on. And it doesn't matter what, but you understand, they always say the government. That the government is expected, or the city, the state, they usually say. The government is usually listed, save for the federal. But you understand, they'll say something like, well, here's a new program that's been proposed, or we're going to do, and the mayor say, this is what we're going to do to help the people here of our city, or a commissioner of the county. And you go, and one thing about it, if I get this through, it's already built into the bill, the city is going to pick up the cost of building these new homes. And nobody listens anymore. And why do they say the government's going to pick up the cost? It's to keep them from saying, well, the governor or this psychiatrist, somebody wants to build these new homes and he wants the rest of us to pay for it. Nobody wants to hear that, so you don't even want to hear it. Which, we may be getting close to that allegory that they told me was coming up in the script tonight. You know, for all I know, we're not talking about government, or even if we're talking about it, I for one don't have any interest in it, and if you do, you're in the wrong place. No. But you understand, it is language again, it is talk, not serving to clarify or to explain what's going on. That is not what talk is for. One of the purposes of talk is to keep men from looking too bluntly, too directly at certain matters, contrary to the commonly held belief. And I say commonly held belief, it's this commonly held sane belief. That if you tried to tell people, if you tried to stand up in front of some sane, ordinary, middle-class crowd on this planet and say, have any of you ever thought that the purpose of talk is not to explain things? Of course, what I could do, I could follow a speaker, I could play both parts. I could put on nose and glasses and come out and be Dr. So-and-so and do a quick little 5-minute survey about how the modern world of man, how all of the progress of man, how all of the evolution of man is obviously totally dependent upon man's ability to speak. That were it not for talk, we would not be here having this meeting. We would not have the television cameras. We would not have clothes. We would have nothing without speech, no matter what else. We can talk about opposing thumbs, the ability to plant crops, to freeze them. We can talk about anything, but without speech, we could have never been able to manipulate and turn the environment to our own use. Like I say, thank you and leave and go off, take off the nose and glasses and come back out dressed another way and say, by the way, no offense to my esteemed colleague who preceded me here on the podium, but I must point out to you that one of the purposes of speech is not to clarify. It is not to explain. It's to disguise. It's to distract men from looking at things in a certain way. I could do the same. In both, the first one I could sell easy. But if I'd done that and then tried to follow myself, I hope I didn't give up my day job. Because the crowd would turn on me, at least mentally. They'd figure I was some sort of ringer that walked in, that I was probably part of the catering service and lost my way and need to be locked up for my own good. Yet it's true. The first part obviously is true. But the first part is true at the second grade level, the kindergarten level. The other part is the real truth. It is the point-blank truth that, of course, it's not the point-blank truth now I put into words, but it's the closest you ever heard, is that talk is to distract man from seeing certain things too directly. And you never listen to it. A fourth time, this is not a psychological deconstruction of modern day linguistics, rhetoric, and other stuff. It just may sound like it if you're listening with childish ears, psychological ears. Men must continually talk about things, and it changes, such as subconscious desires, subconscious mind, now instead of demonic forces. It is the same thing. Not one bit of difference, except there's a great deal of difference. Any sane person on this planet would scoff at that. They would just dismiss that idea, and its author is, you're nuts, or you're in way over your head. That in fact, the idea of the subconscious mind, in all its many aspects, would seem to be a direct substitute, a direct progression beyond the world of demon-possessed. My God! Grow up, man! Get in the 20th century. We don't burn witches. People don't kill other people. People do not kill their mother and father and say, well, the devil made me do it. I'm sorry, nobody does that. Nobody even try that in a court of law. But they will not hesitate to talk about multiple personalities, or sometimes my mind wanders and it's hard for me to get it back. And the whole idea of a subconscious mind, it is now a piece of accepted reality. And it would appear to be progress from any ordinary view, that this is obviously progress. We have come a long way from saying that people are possessed by demons. Come on. It's a good thing that finally we had people like Freud, and that set in the whole march of psychological progress in the field as a real discipline. In fact, down near a science, but at least a discipline. We've come so far now, we don't believe people are demon-possessed. Now, people do have. We all do. We have motivations. We have certain bruises. We have certain drives that are operating on us at an unconscious level that we cannot, by its own definition of it being unconscious or subconscious, that we cannot directly control. Now, that's a long way from being demon-possessed. Yeah, do you want me to write the words and you'll compare how many words it is from demon possession to unconscious traumas? It's the same thing. But do notice one more time, it is not the same thing to ordinary minds. It could not be. So we are apparently making progress, moving right along. Okay. Moving right along. Somebody seemed to like patriotism. I was just trying to think of different examples. How about this? Those of you, of course not everyone had the privilege of being in the armed forces, but enough of you seen movies and stuff about, what boot camp, when you're first drafted, and they send you to a place 8 to 12 weeks, and you're isolated, stripped of all semblances of individuality, taking all your jewelry off, and everybody gets their head shaved. The worst you've ever seen in movies and TV for you women and you other draft dodgers, it is no exaggeration. They don't have to. It's not a parody. And it's nothing new. The Romans knew how to do it. And so they take you there and they isolate you and they just run you ragged and they really put you through a form of brainwashing in that sense of wearing you out, making you do useless tasks, but en masse. They get you to the point that you are patriotic, but we have to call it that because we call it being trained, being patriotically trained to do your patriotic duty, which is to keep you from seeing, that's just another example of mammalian aggression. But that's all it is. It's those in charge. It's a charismatic leader. In this case, it can be the government. That they say, well, everyone, this is fair and equitable, everyone must serve in the armed forces. And by now you know this, and I assume you won't choke on the examples. It's simply the dance. It's the dance of the wolves, it's the dance of the hippos, it's the dance of the rams. The government, the charismatic leader, whether you want to look at individual or the government, that is, whoever's dancing, whoever's taking your money, who's ever in charge. They say it's equitable. We must fight for the fatherland, the motherland, the sisterland. We must be patriotic. And everyone, it's fair. We will all train. We'll get to the point that if somebody says, get them! You'll get up and you'll go off and walk right into the face of a Tommy gun knowing that you're going to be killed, or chances are, and you'll go do it. Well, it's patriotic. And it'll be fair to everybody, and we must do it, and it's always all except for my sons, my daughters, and anybody that contributes money to help keep up the government, help prop up the throne. It's like everybody's cannon fodder, but it's mostly you people who are cannon fodder. That is. It's the same people who hear, well, they're going to build a new home for old soldiers in the city. They're going to pick up the tab. There's no city. There's no government. There's nobody on the throne. There's no charismatic leader without you. The government can't pick up the tab. Let me pick out the obvious. The government cannot pick up the tab for anything. That's no secret. The government doesn't have any money. The government's not in business. The government has money, but gets it one place, you. And so when they say, but again, you're used to it the same way as charismatic leader answers that little disquieting feeling that you get when you hear that a whole new group of people have again killed themselves by eating 3 straight Big Macs without stopping. And you can't understand it. And they say, yes, but it was their charismatic leader, Dave Thomas. No, he wouldn't want to besmirch his own business. And so they say, charismatic leader, and it's answered. But see, now the words, forget the charismatic leader as being a person, the word is now dancing with you. And as we say in the psychological trade, at least the psychedelic aspect of it, it be leading. It be leading. In the same way, the government. There's no such thing as the government. We've been through this, there's no such thing as the church. There is no institutions on this planet. There's only people. But that's another story. We've been through that, but this might be the time to bring it up if we had time. But thank God I don't have a watch. So, at least I'm not a Baptist. Well, I was thinking of a joke there's an old Cajun joke about a little Catholic kid and a Baptist kid and about how long services went, and never mind. It's not worth going into. Unless you're Cajun, then you know it already. It's a catchphrase immediately. Again, in a positive sense, not a negative sense at least, from the ordinary view, when they will talk about some new program, and at first you might want to get tense, and it says, but the county will be picking up the complete cost of this new program. And that's like saying, the charismatic leader, and this is sort of like you can relax, that you're a little disturbed when you heard, no, not some other people have killed themselves. Decent. What's going on? Well, it turns out it was a certain charismatic leader, and it's like you can turn away and go back to the kitchen and get some coffee. They explained it. Or you hear something like, they're now proposing to build 20 new homes for juvenile delinquents. And you're already thinking, shit, they ought to shoot most of them anyway. And you think, and they go, but it's already been pointed out that the federal government, in each and every instance, no matter what state, will be picking up the full tab for this new construction. And they say, oh, they're not in business. They don't make anything. They get money one place. They take it from you. But it answered it. Because you're not supposed to turn around. This is not, those of you who know should know, this is not an attack on government. But what if they every time said, well, there are going to be such and such new programs, and we're all going to be paying God knows how much, but it's coming out of your pocket. Think about the stories every now in the news or in the paper of all the new programs, and some of them sound good to you and some sound bad if you're an ordinary person, because the ones that sound good to you, of course, have something to do with your own grazing range and fixing up your sewers. And you think, yeah. And especially when you don't hear it's going to cost anything, you're delighted. But then you hear it's going to be something about fixing up somebody else's drains across town. And at first you're going to go, and they go, yeah, but the county, their own county, is going to be picking up the tab. You go, okay. You're going off and forget about it. But what if they started saying every time 20 or 200 other educated, decent, middle-class people were found dead just outside of Cheyenne today, and it turns out they were part of a cult, but that doesn't explain anything, just everybody's crazy as hell anyway. They had more education, and the newsman says, the report says, well, in fact, I only finished high school, and these people, most of them had graduate degrees, and they all were looking down at them. They're doctors and lawyers. I mean, the whole world's nuts, and they were obviously crazy. But plus, if they were that smart, it makes you wonder how sane all of us are. And they look right in the camera. Now you know that no one wants to hear that. You know that. That's why life comes up with these terms. It slips in and goes, charismatic leader. And somebody goes, well, charismatic leader. And apparently all of these new programs to help the disturbed teenagers in our state is going to cost in excess of $5 billion. But The federal government's going to pick up the entire tab. Huh. All right, I was going to say the patriotic. Just think you've got to be patriotic. It's nothing new. And if you'll jump right quick from government and kings and princes and all forms of collective behavior driving, sending out the young men or anybody dumb enough to do it to go out and be killed for the sake of defending the fatherland, the homeland, at least you take that being, I think we're into real allegory possibilities here. Think what life does to your king. Why not keep bringing up kings? I say king because it sounds a little more distractive to most of you than if I've been talking about the government. Life has put a king. It's your tuning on the receiver you call your brain, your mind. It's the web. In this case, instead of a spider's web, it is a communications web. The network of the signals that life is sending out. And you're tuned to this one place as your king. And that tells you what's what. Except you think, well, wait a minute, this is my own judgment. Are you sure? Well, sure, I'm sure. Okay, well, just checking. Well, watch it. I just want to make sure you didn't have any psychological problems. Well, we all have a few, but at least I'm not demon possessed. And plus, I do not contribute money to all these damn welfare programs that are fixing other people's sewers either. And plus, I'm patriotic. So watch it. Is the king, whoever's in charge, the head wolf. And then we're back to remember the second grade level, because we're talking about life looking after itself within a closed system. Life being able to stretch, straighten itself out, spit up some phlegm, put on its ear, scratch itself. Life is going to do that. Life is going to look after itself, and it's men who think, wait a minute, it's snowing, and it's dandruff. They think, boy, it's getting sticky, the whole idea here, and your earwax. I could go into less savory. I just did. Comparisons, but I will not. Keeping in mind the fact that this is, I'm sure today it's the birthday of someone's mother, so I do not want to be offensive. Being patriotic, it's so that you will go out and die. And I say go out and die, it is simply a continuing, it's so that you will not mistake it for the continuing, still present mammalian aggression. That's all it is. Now, the way the world is based, of course, you've got to be an idiot not to be patriotic, or at least not to be in favor of all those around you being patriotic. Always remember that. I've given you other examples. If you're stuck, or if one of your hobbies is watching TV, always remember, don't ever badmouth commercial TV. Your secret phrase should be, or secret idea, some of you wanted something to do that came out from a cathode ray tube, is your attitude should be commercial networks, commercial television for everybody else. PBS for me, because if it wasn't for the other, you wouldn't have this. So, hey, everybody should be patriotic. I'm not saying anything against patriotism, because the aggression patterns of the herd survival instinct of man is still such that if you're living in the country of elk land, and the elklanders do not feel enough patriotism, as it's called, to scare the wolflanders who live next door, then pretty soon you're not going to be an elklander worthy to be called, I think alive would fit. Yeah. So, your attitude should be, by God, I'm in favor of patriotism for everybody else. Did you get that? For everybody else, which is the same thing that the king does anyway. It's the same thing that whoever's in charge does. The head wolf does not go out and get killed. That's not being a smart leader. He sends everybody else to get killed. He has to stay behind. That's like the old thing about the general tells them all, well, men, we're going out today, 5 o'clock, we're all here. When we hit that beach or when we go that hill to the opposing trenches, there's no doubt. I can't lie to you. Not as close as we've been. Probably the majority of us will not come back. We will die there. Our blood will be shed to protect our husbands and wives in my business back home. It is. There's no doubt that probably most of us will be dead this time tomorrow. But What are we here for? Are we here not to defend that which we love? Yay! Are we here not to defend our way of life, for the elk way of life? Yay! He said, all right, get prepared, fix bayonets, and let's go. And by God, I wish I could go with you, but I've had this horrible sinus thing going. Anyway, I'm right here behind you, of course, thinking all the time, plotting. Mainly plotting how you can keep from getting killed. You cannot lead the dance if you're dead. No. The mammalian aggression is still dancing in man, and it's just right there. I pulled out, slipped in on you, I believe it was last time, that said a man who does not understand that civilization is simply a new form of jungle warfare has no idea what civilization is about. Has no idea what progress is about. That's not a slam on people. It's certainly not an attack on patriotism. I am simply showing you that what man talks about is not what's going on. And it's not because he's stupid. Oh, sure he's stupid, but we've already been put through that. It's that he will not simply listen. And for one thing, if you need another way to approach it, is why I brought it up this way for the last several nights, is you don't have to go out looking for secret knowledge and secret information. It's just stop and listen to what everybody is talking about. It's everywhere. I just pick them out of thin air off the news. I can make up the whole night script just driving 2 blocks from here and turn on the radio if I happen to be there when the news is coming on and hear 2 or 3 new phrases and descriptions. Lines in the sand, level playing field, whatever the latest is. Cultural deprivation, economic hardships. And you hear them all and you think that it means something. In fact, it helps. Remember, at the ordinary level, it helps move your mind along if you're ordinary. That you don't have to stop and analyze and stay disturbed at things such as 200 more people kill themselves over religion. And then you hear a charismatic leader. Oh, okay. And then you can keep going. It is to assist ordinary thought. But if you think ordinary thought is going to explain anything to you, then what the hell are you doing, listening to me? The first item tonight says, for the ordinary mind, the height of hubris is in it thinking it understands anything. And part of what keeps it operating in that kind of blind, foolish hubris is the fact that it gets little phrases and things seem to explain it. Like, it's hard to understand why people die over what they call a religion, and it wasn't even a real religion. It was some little cult. I mean, they believe weird crap. It wasn't like it was, Baptist or Methodist or somebody like that, because they don't do that. So I think they're misnamed it called religion, and yet they thought they were doing something spiritual. That is, and you just want your car, you're driving when you hear it, and you won't stop until you hear the phrase charismatic leader. Oh. It helps the mind, the ordinary mind, flow along. It explains nothing. Contraire, it's to keep you from looking too directly at certain things. Which is what you would be about to do, to go, people are killing themselves again over religion? Or somebody's about to attack somebody else under the guise of patriotism? And you don't know, because you're not prepared to do this if you're ordinary, so you don't know what to think about it. And it's that feeling of, I was being understated about and saying a certain kind of disquietness. Huh? And then they say something like patriotic duty, charismatic leader. The government will be picking up the full cost of this new program. Yes, like you can relax. Because at that level you understand, it did explain. If I jumped into the person I'm making up, an ordinary sane person went, why did you suddenly relax? I noticed your sphincter let go and you kind of got back to dry. Once you heard charismatic leader, and if you're an ordinary person, you'd say, well, that had helped explain it. I can do it for them, but you can surely do it. And they can say, well, it just shows that there's certain personalities in the world that can apparently get some kind of psychological hold or get some kind of entree into other people's spirit or their mind. And so I can understand it. I mean, it's sad, but, a charismatic leader, I know that kind of thing. I've seen movies. I've seen those things about, Rasputin and Peter Lorre or Caligula or somebody. Yeah, I mean, it happens. And so it apparently explained something, right? No, it was to keep you from looking directly at it. It didn't explain anything. It was to cloud it. It was to distract is a better. I shouldn't try to improve on my own descriptions. It's to distract you from looking too bluntly at certain things. My God, that's a brick wall with mortar. Oh, no, it may look like that at first, but wait a minute. And sure enough, all you got to do is wait 1 second. Because, what are you going to make of a blank wall or a brick wall? I give you a new version. How many more am I going to do? Adam and Eve. I give you a new one. God was right there all the time, the creative force. Or if you like the one, this great green dragon in your little phone booth apartment. And it didn't mean anything until one of them punched someone and went, who is that guy? Then we're off and running. Up until then, it was just too obvious. And they had to go, who is that? Is he? And Adam says, I wish your father would leave us alone. And she goes, you're my father? I thought it was your father. I thought he was one of your relatives. The mind was off and going. Hi-yo. What's his name? That all get on? I'll teach him. We tried to plant so it'd run out and you wouldn't get that last part. But see, it shows you've been bad little viewers. Next time you better do better.